I've got a question, and then Josh has a question. Here's one. How do you determine what the priorities of the institution are?
That's a question I get all the time. It's not a secret formula, a secret sauce that you could then try to game. That question gets to me is like, oh, if you know the priorities, then maybe you could try to game the priorities. Or you just want to know because if you're not one of the priorities, then you're probably not going to apply. You could probably guess at this. They're not going to advertise this, by the way. But what I always look at, or what I encourage you to do, is to look at they always announce when they accept last year's class, usually in May. A college will put out a press release and they'll say, we got 40,000 applications. We accepted 8,000, 1,500 are coming, whatever the numbers are. And all of these accolades about the class, that gives you a clue about what they are focused on. If they talk a lot about, oh, we accepted, we have our, all these STEM graduates or whatever, because maybe they started a new school in engineering and they really want to focus on that. So I would look a little bit at that, but you're not going to find a list like a formula or a list of ingredients. My advice is apply where you're going to apply and let the chips fall where they may.
Good. Thank you. Josh, your question?
Oh, Josh, you're on mute.
I have a history of doing that in every single Zoom, so I'm glad I kept that streak alive today. So in the book, you talk a little bit about, the idea of the college admissions industrial complex, and, you have all these companies that are sort of geared towards it. And that also leads then to an uneven playing field, especially when you're talking about kids getting accepted into highly selective colleges because of things like prep and, consultants that help kids, get their package, all of that. From a high school, a public high school lens, what are things that we can do to help even the playing field for all of our students? Because we have such a broad mix of socioeconomic backgrounds for our students. What are some of the things that you think we can do to help our kids, be able to go to the schools that they want to go to that make the best match for them?
Yeah, I think that I think we should age appropriate, but I think we should start the process a little bit earlier so that students have enough time. I think we rush this sometimes, and I'm not saying go off and start applying to colleges or visiting them, but really start to talk about what I call college 101. Most students, especially students from, I was a first generation high school college student. My brother and sister went to college, but I was the third in our family to go. Among the siblings, there were so many things when I got to college, and certainly now, that I didn't know. I didn't know the differences between a liberal, I talked a lot today about the differences between a teaching institution and a research institution, a small liberal arts college. What's a public and private, what are the differences between public and private universities? What does it mean to major in something? Do you have to declare a major? There's all of these, what I call college 101, that most students don't know if they haven't talked about college at their family dinner table since they were in first grade. And so one of the things I would try to do, even the playing field, is to try to raise the education level of everyone about college and what does it mean and I would stop talking about it as college. I would say post-secondary education, because there's a lot of different options out there that I think are great for everybody, and I mean everybody. And so we should talk about it as post-secondary education. Then I think we need to talk about a little bit about what happens after college as well. What is the job market like? I think that most people are going into the STEM fields now because all they see are salaries. Well, another resource that I would look at is the college scorecard. So it's a U.S. Department of Education website called the College Scorecard. Just Google it. And on there, you could look at the salary outcomes of every college in America. You could look at average debt as well. And if they have enough graduates by field, you could even look at salaries. And so you can start to compare, if I got a computer science degree at the University of Illinois versus, the University of Minnesota versus, the University of Chicago or whatever, what are the differences in salary outcomes? I think we need to start talking more students about, what is the job market like? What are salaries like? And to show them that there's a broader range of jobs out there and a broader range of salaries out there than we tend to think of. So those are two things that I would do. I think that we need to front load this a little bit. I think that we can also, the other thing, Josh, is that I know that counselors are overwhelmed right now. I wouldn't
Yes.
put this on counselors. I think a lot of this could actually be integrated into the curriculum in other courses in middle school and high school. And again, I know I'll probably hear from a lot of teachers, the curriculum is already packed. I get it. But are there little ways that you can have these discussions in different classes so that by the time they're juniors, we do have more of an even playing field?
Mhm, mhm. Good. I know that this is a question that comes up every year. Is it better to take more difficult courses in high school and end up with a B than take easier courses where you could get an A? Take it away, Jeff.
Gilda, I laughed before you delivered the punchline because I exactly where the selective colleges are going to tell you challenge yourself and get an A. They're going to ask for both. And
Right.
it is at some point, and I told this story at some point. I told this story. It might have been on WGN this morning, but maybe I told this somewhere else recently. I was talking to the admissions dean at Duke, and he said 10 years ago they used to talk about these students who had a wall of fives. Fives meaning, the highest score you could score on an AP. And a wall of fives meant a student who took 8 to 10, maybe even more APs and scored a 5 in all of them. Now, he was telling me the story, and I was just shocked. My mouth dropped when he said this, right? Because, most students don't take 8 to 10 APs, and I think the average score is like 3 or something like that. So we're talking, this is 10 years ago. He said this. And now he said that doesn't even move the needle. Doesn't even move the needle. And I said, well, what does move the needle? And he said, well, taking these college courses outside of high school, the curriculum in high school is not big enough for you anymore. So you have to go out and you have to do more. I mean, at some point, we have to have this conversation what are we doing this for? At the end of the day, what are we doing this for? Is going to Harvard or Duke or university, is it I'm not saying these are not great places, but they're not the only places. And if you have the wherewithal and you have the drive, you're going to do incredibly well at many, many colleges and universities. You know what else? Because I've talked to many of these students in my new book. You're probably going to be happier at some of these other places. You're going to find friends. You're not going to feel like you're in constant competition to get into the right classes, the right courses, the right the right extracurricular activities, the right internships and things like that. You're going to have a much more balanced life at the end of the day. I'm not trying to dash your dreams and saying don't go to Harvard or don't apply there. But there are so many other colleges out there to be thinking about. And I just want us to go from this to this in the college search. Just expand that lens a little bit because I think you will be surprised by what you find.
Right. And you're getting some people who agree with you so much so, and saying it's really about being prepared for college. That's what we're talking about. Lots of questions about early decision because there are so many questions about early decision around equity. And do I have to know that can afford this college no matter what?
So the big thing about early decision is it's binding, but if the financial aid package does not come in as agreed to as or expected, you can get out of the early decision binding agreement for that reason, right? And that's usually in the notes when you sign the agreement. So if you don't get the money that you need to afford the college, you can get out.
Two quick questions to end this here. How do you think merit, not need-based scholarships, has impacted the industry of college admissions? Do you consider merit scholarships an industry in itself?
Yep, definitely. And I'm sure Ron will talk about this when he's on. And there are a number of companies, including one that I profile in the book, not based far from you in Chicago, where they work with colleges and universities to try to determine if we give this student $500 more or $1,000 more, are they more likely to attend? It is essentially, I call it the money ball of higher education. They do the same thing that the GMs of the teams do, where they try to decide how much should we spend on this position versus that position. And they're doing the same thing with students.
One of our last questions here. Is it the same? Is it in industry when you think about grad school and law school? Same? That it,
Yes, it's the same. It's a little bit different. I don't want to get too much into grad school because that's a whole different conversation to have. But grad school is it's just as much of an industry. But hopefully, you're going to get a job that will pay for your grad school.
we are not going to transition now, Jeff. You're going to say goodbye to us so you can have this conversation with some others. And we're going to hear from Matt Pietrafetta. Josh is going to read the introduction. So some of the questions here around testing, we're going to take those now.
Great.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Gilda, Josh, thank you, everybody out there. Best of luck.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Great talk. All right, stick around. Josh, take it away.
All right, thanks a lot, Gilda. So it's my pleasure to introduce Matt Pietrafetta. He founded Academic Approach in 2001, currently serves as the Chief Executive Officer. Since 2001, Matthew has supervised the organization's instructional services, curriculum, and technology development. And while preparing New York City high school students for college entrance exams, he worked to define a model of test preparation based less on test-taking strategies and more on skills development. One of the things that we're proud of in Glenbard is that we've partnered with Academic Approach, I believe since 2020, to provide free test preparation for any of our students who sign up to participate. We feel like this is one of our opportunities to even that playing field for the students of Glenbard, and we've really enjoyed working with Academic Approach, and I'm going to let Matt talk a little bit about the services that they offer.
Thank you, Gilda. Thank you, Josh, for having me. I just want to say, as someone who majored in English undergrad and did a PhD in English, I'm so appreciative that Jeff talked about the value of an English degree, because for me, I feel it's helped develop tremendous critical thinking, critical reasoning skills that have been really useful in college and career. And everyone talks about STEM, but no one really talks about English. So let's hear it for the English majors out there. Thank you all for having me today. I'm delighted to join Gilda and Josh and talk about the landscape of standardized testing. There are some changes. There always seem to be changes in recent years with standardized testing, but there's more forthcoming. And I want to share some of those with you today. So if you go to academicapproach.com/GPS, you can find more information. You can download a resource document from which I'll be presenting today. And there's lots of information there for you if you want to engage us and explore free practice tests and a free consultation with our directing team. You can go right to that website and inquire. My agenda is really based on three core values. I want to talk about how to make the test preparation process efficient, insightful, and growth-minded. So, to Jeff's point, that we're focused on not just getting scores and being admitted, but we're focused on skills that last, that lead to college and career success, that transcend beyond just a standardized test. So the three values: let's make the process efficient, let's gain insights into who you are as a student, and let's think about growth on multiple levels: growth of score, but also growth of skills that really help with college and career. And then I do have to speak to some specific interesting developments in terms of testing pathways for the class of 2026, because things are changing a bit. So first, in terms of talking about efficiency, it's really important to dispel a myth. And the myth is basically that the SAT or the ACT is favored by schools based on regions. When I grew up in the Boston area, I only knew of the SAT. It was an East Coast exam. This is a million years ago. And of course, the ACT is an Iowa-based exam, so from the Midwest. And there was some regionalism associated with them decades ago, but no longer. If you apply to West Coast, East Coast, Midwest schools, they will accept if you're going to submit a standardized testing score, either the SAT or the ACT. What's the significance of this? It's your choice what you submit. And for many, many students, one test or the other is more favorable. So you want to find that path of lesser resistance. You want to identify it, and you want to focus on that test if you are going to be taking standardized tests to apply to college. So it's really a matter of preference. So which would you prefer? And that starts with getting a bit educated about what's the difference between the exams. So currently, and all this information is available, I'll move through it quickly for the sake of time, but if you go to academicapproach.com/GPS, you can download the document that has all these slides that I'll be sharing. At the highest level, the current ACT has an English section, a math section, a reading section, and a science section. And the current SAT, which is a digital exam, a multi-stage adaptive exam, which just changed last year, has 4 modules, reading and writing modules 1 and 2, and 2 math modules 1 and 2. In looking at the highest level of these 2 exams, there quite a bit of difference between them. 215 questions total on the ACT and only 98 on the SAT. A science section on the ACT, not a science section on the SAT. So just kind of starting to funnel in, you can start to ask questions about yourself as a test taker. Would I prefer a longer exam, up to 3 hours? Do I like a shorter format? Do I like science? Does that feature me? Is that a preferred section or is it non-preferred? So these are really important questions to start to ask so that you can identify which is the better test for you. And if you do invest time and resources in your preparation, you're focused on the exam that favors you better. The SAT has become different. It was revised in 2023, and it became a multi-stage adaptive digital exam. What does this mean? So you take module 1 of the reading and writing, which has some reading and grammar questions on it. And based on performance, if you do well enough, you go up to a harder module. Or if you don't get the requisite number of questions right, you go down to an easier model. That affects your scoring potential. That's called a multi-stage adaptive exam. It's not adaptive item by item like the GRE or the graduate exams like the GMAT, but by these 2 modules. The test always starts out with reading and writing, module 1 into module 2, a break, then math, module 1 into module 2 with that branching structure for both, and that's the exam. If you look at the SAT versus the ACT, just on sort of a visual of the timing and the structure, you can see how this could impact you as a student very differently. I start on the SAT with reading and writing, and then I end with 2 math modules. On the ACT, I start with English grammar, then go to math, then go to reading, and end with science. And there's an optional essay as well that isn't really required by colleges. So from a test-taking standpoint, from a student experience, order matters. Am I ending with a preferred topic? Math is my preferred topic. I feel good ending there because I feel strong and comfortable. Or is that non-preferred? Science will always be the 4th section of the ACT. It's always the end, it's never the first. So how do I feel about ending there? So these little nuances really have a big impact on student test-taking experience, and they're really worth considering and understanding and identifying prior to really preparing to figure this out and establish a preference. What we do is we offer complimentary practice tests. We grade your SAT, grade your ACT, and we put it on a concordance table. 1,600 is the highest score on the SAT, 36 on the ACT, and we compare and contrast. I'll speak a little bit more about this. But if you can figure out if quantitatively one is more favorable for you, that's really important information, because it's maybe a path of lesser resistance to go left or right, ACT or SAT. And you want that quantitative comparison to figure that out. If we move through a section by section comparison of the 2 tests, you can really see how this could impact student test-taking experience differently. So if you compare the reading sections of the ACT and the SAT, you notice some big differences. One is that the ACT has longer passages. There are 4 of them, about 800 and 900 words. And the SAT has really short passages, 1 question each. The ACT has long passages with 10 questions each. And they go through these different genres of prose, social science, humanities, natural science, whereas the SAT covers the same genres and more. It may even have some poetry on there, which the ACT won't feature. But they're short, bite-sized passages, and I'll show you what this looks like. So here's an ACT. You read a long social science passage. This one's on Betty Friedan, and then you answer 10 questions on that specific passage. Then you go on to another 10 more, another 10 more, another 10 more, and that's the reading. So you have this longer experience of engaging a text. Whereas if you go over to the SAT, you have a short text and maybe about 4 lines or so, and then 1 question on that text. Then you move to an entirely different text. Now, some students find this more jarring because they're bouncing from topic to topic and they'd rather enjoy diving into one passage and doing 10 questions. Others really enjoy it because it's more of a brief exchange with a small text, one question and move on. This is entirely, it's impossible to generalize what's easier, what's harder. It's entirely personalized to the student's experience, and it's something to consider, really reflect on. And every student is, we say, tests are standardized, students are not, is one of our guiding phrases. So it's just important to understand this as a student, experience it, and make your own judgment. When it comes to the English and the writing sections of the ACT and the SAT, you wouldn't really pick between the two exams on this area because they're very, very similar. And I'll give you examples. So they're basically wonderful editing tests, proofreading tests. They give you a passage, underline a portion of a line, and then they ask you to revise it. And it's really going through a core curriculum of great and really important grammar rules. And I'm biased because I'm a big proponent of teaching young people grammar, so they have the confidence and the capacity to be able to craft sophisticated sentences, edit their own writing. And I think it's a transferable skill that sticks with them through college and career. But both tests take it seriously, and you need to understand what a run-on sentence is and the difference between a semicolon and a colon, what a misplaced modifier is, all sorts of great grammar core curriculum that lasts through college and career. But both tests require it. You wouldn't really choose between the two on that basis. On math, there are some differences. So the ACT has 60 questions in total in 1 hour. And the SAT has 44 questions in 70 minutes. So you have more time per question with fewer questions on the SAT. The SAT is a little bit of a slower exam. The ACT is a little bit more speeded, and this can impact students. Now, when it comes to the curriculum covered, it's largely the same, 7th through 11th grade topics up through Algebra 2 and trigonometry. You don't need calculus for either test. You don't even need much pre-calculus, just really Algebra 2 and trig, geometry, and Algebra 1. Similar tests insofar as there are multiple choice questions. You have a graphing calculator you can use on both tests. And like I said, a 7th through 11th grade coverage of curriculum. The only difference really are two. In the SAT, they do have some of these student-produced response questions, like the bottom one, where there are no multiple choice. And you have to grade in your answer. You have to, if the answer is 1/3, you have to grade in to the bubble sheet 1/3. Also, second difference, and some students are very familiar with this tool, the Desmos calculator, which is a wonderful tool, is embedded in the app for SAT. If the student really loves using Desmos in math problem solving and is comfortable with it, that's an advantage for SAT math. ACT in its current form does not allow for the Desmos calculator. You can use your graphing calculator, but not the Desmos calculator. And the biggest difference of all between the two exams, the science section. ACT has one, SAT does not. And what does that look like? It is a test of reading and reasoning with experimental data presentations. They'll give you something on earth science, biology, chemistry, physics, some tables, charts, graphs, and you have to draw some conclusions based on the evidence. So it's really not science content knowledge as much as it is science reasoning, data interpretation, and making sense of graphs and charts. And so that's a conspicuous difference between the two tests, because this is the one section the SAT does not have and the ACT does. So at a high level, that gives you some of the content and construct differences between the two exams. And like I said, this is really important to kind of evaluate early on before investing a lot of time and resources in preparation, because students do react to these differences differently, both quantitatively and qualitatively. Their scores will be different, one more favorable than the other, and they'll feel qualitatively like, I enjoyed that test more. That's more how I work, how I operate, how I think. And if you can, we call it the double check. If you can figure out, check quantitatively, this test is better for my student, and double check qualitatively, they actually liked it more. So it's better for them numerically, and they favor it, so they're more invested in preparing for it. We believe in in trying to figure that out on the front end before just making a decision, so that you can be more informed with your time and the student can be more invested. So now, if that wasn't complicated enough, here's why I do have to share some information about that is unique to the class of 2026, our current 11th graders, about how testing pathways are developing and changing in this year of transition. So there's a change happening with the ACT, and there's also another change, which is that the state, Illinois State Board of Education, after had used as a high school exit exam, the ACT from 2001 to 2016. Then it switched to the SAT. Many of you, if you have freshmen or sophomores or juniors, or if you have sophomores or juniors, they took the PSAT last April. Everyone, state mandated public schools have to take the PSAT for your freshmen and your sophomores. And then all the juniors last year took the SAT. That was state mandated. Well, ACT won the contract back, and now they are providing the college entrance exams, the exit exam for all public schools in Illinois. So everyone this spring will take at school in April an ACT or a lower level version of it for sophomores and juniors. So we're switching to the ACT. Had been there up until 2016, been an SAT state through 2023, now back to the ACT. And what's happening is, while that is happening, the classic ACT, as ACT calls it, the one that I just described, is transforming into what they're calling the ACT core, which is a different version of the test that is going to have a science optional section. So the science at a certain point, and that's going to be as of fall of 2025, will be an optional section that students do not have to take. And the test becomes shorter as a result. It goes down to 2 hours and 5 minutes from 2 hours and 55 minutes. So what does this mean for you? I'll go to this slide, which is really sort of breaks it down for what's happening this year and what does this mean for the class of 2026. Everyone's going to take, if you're a public school student in Illinois, everyone will sit for the classic ACT in April as a school-wide test at school. It's state mandated, and every junior will sit for it. And that will be the current ACT that I described that has English, math, reading, and science. The SAT, if you wanted to go in on other national test dates, many juniors I described here will take an SAT in spring of their junior year, March or May, and then retest again before they apply to colleges. Same with the classic SAT, it's available to you up through July. As of the July administration, however, the classic ACT, the one I described, will no longer exist. So if you were retesting in the fall and trying to take the ACT, you would be taking, as of September, you would be taking the ACT core, a new exam. They're going to be bringing out the ACT core earlier. It's going to come out also, if you want to take it in a national test center, April and June, and July will be available. But as of September, the classic ACT is gone and the ACT core is all that's available. So juniors now are thinking about a couple things. One, well, certainly I'm going to do my best on my classic ACT in April. That's important for my school. It might be the test that I apply to colleges with, and it's free to me. I take it, the school pays for it, the state pays for it. It's a wonderful opportunity. But maybe I also am interested in exploring the SAT. Or maybe also if I'm retesting in senior fall and science was a non-preferred section for me on the ACT, I might take it again with an optional science in the fall of my senior year. So an interesting time for class of 2026. Lots of available tests. Certainly your school district is providing you with a free one, the classic ACT in April. But there are these other choices along the way that I wanted to share with you. And also to make it clear that that classic ACT, if you want to retest on it, you will take it in school in April. You could take it again in June and July at a national test center, but then it goes the way of the dodo. It is not going to exist anymore. So now I'll wrap up with just a couple of the core values. We talked about making an efficient decision SAT or ACT and understanding the pathways available to you and researching that. Along the way, whatever you're preparing for in terms of a test, you can make the process insightful. You can use the score reports to shed light on skills that you can develop that will make you more college and career ready. So this is an important point. We often go in, students will go in and take a practice test and be kind of shocked. I didn't do as well as I thought. I'm a pretty solid student in school, but my score doesn't seem to show it. Don't let that shock you. Don't let it dispirit you. That's to be expected. Why? Standardized tests present a vast amount of material that covers multiple years, like 7th or 11th grade math. You're bound to have forgotten something. And the test also presents some of the material in unfamiliar ways. You may be a very effective writer in school and you're doing quite well, but you're just not used to seeing colons, introducing lists, and you just don't know how to use them, or dashes to set off non-essential information. It's unfamiliar to you. Can you learn it? Of course, but at first blush, you just don't know it. You haven't seen it. And that's not to put you off. It's just, it signifies the opportunity that, oh, if I review some material I knew maybe back in 8th or 9th grade, I forgot my geometry rules, I can grow my score. And if I learn some new material, I can also grow my score. So in the document that you can download at academicapproach.com/GPS, I have a section in the document on personalized pathways of learning, choosing which test is right for you. And just to review, to make the process insightful, try to take 2 practice tests, take an SAT and an ACT, and compare them. You can put them on the concordance table, will help you do it. And in this case, you look at this student, their ACT is far more favorable than their SAT. That's an indicator that perhaps that's the better of the 2 tests for them. And then you can dive into the score report and really learn a lot about yourself. This student, if you go through their English score report, we tag in our tests every item to a particular rule or lesson that's associated with it. And the great thing about the standardized tests is they are standardized. They test a core curriculum over and over again, and it's predictable. They value sentence construction, for example, you can see in this report. That is, editing sentences to correct fragments, run-ons, and misplaced modifiers. Really important for student writers. This student, of 10 total questions in that category, only scored 3 correct, leaving 7 available points. That tells you insight, and it gives you insight into a skill that you could learn to gain a lot of points, but also a core skill necessary to be a really effective writer and proofreader of your own work. So the question then is, can you use the process to gain insight? So it's not just the drudgery of taking a standardized test, it's the opportunity to learn. It's the opportunity to learn about yourself. Could this be a skill that could make me more effective as a test taker, but also more effective as a student in high school, in college, and beyond? It's important to do this, we feel, because students are different. Here are 2 students that both score an average composite 26 on the ACT, but if you look at their breakdown, one's higher in English, one's higher in math, etc. They have the same average. These scores average to 26, but students aren't averages. They tell stories, specific stories below the line about what they need to focus on and the type of support that is most tailored or personalized to their needs. We then put all this together into sort of a decision-making guide with families and say, okay, quantitatively, qualitatively, if we add it all up, it looks like you prefer the ACT or you prefer the SAT, and then can give you recommendations. Throughout all of this, and this is what I'll end on, can we make this process a growth-minded process? Jeff was talking a lot about the anxiety, the increased competition, so forth. It's an awful lot for adolescents to be dealing with. So can we look at this not as, it's hard, I understand, but can we focus not on the stress and the comparisons with friends, but the individual story of my growth? And what do I need to work on? And why are these skills important? Yes, the test shows me the analysis that I could improve a lot through this, but also this could make me a stronger student in the classroom and beyond, and to focus on the growth opportunity. On our website, I write an article about what students can learn from on one of our blogs, about what you can learn from the ACT and SAT. And I did my PhD in English at Columbia in New York City. I taught in the core there, the core curriculum. And a lot of the skills that I was teaching in the core are precisely the skills, logic and reasoning, grammar, critical thinking are precisely the skills that are being assessed on the ACT and SAT. And if you look at it that way, you could see this as an opportunity to kind of round out your college readiness skills while increasing a score. So they are directly connected and reflective of certain highly relevant academic skills needed for college. So can we focus on the growth opportunity of learning skills and growing scores? So in the end, the healthiest approach is to be efficient, to try to figure out a path of less resistance, try to use the process to gain insights into who the student is, what the student needs to work on, and develop a growth plan that takes the bigger picture of the standardized test within a more holistic view of your education, because the skills are pertinent to high school performance, college performance, and career performance. I know it can be a little stressful. You know, you've got all these choices. You've got wonderful college counseling team and leadership team in the district that is guiding you, taking you through programming. So you're in very, very good hands. So I think that's the number one thing. And then to focus on is that you're in a great district that is giving you all the information, resources you need. So let's not stress too much. But if you do want to take some steps, some specific steps forward, taking practice tests and doing a comparison and contrast is very useful. We do that complimentary, meet and analyze with you, and can create a personalized plan for growth. And then as you do, whatever you do for preparation, can you look at it as an opportunity to say, what do I need to learn as a student to grow my scores and my academic skills? Because I've got a big view of a long road of education and career ahead of me. And this is an opportunity to gain strength and fill in certain areas that maybe need to be rounded out. And if I take that healthy view of it, the process can be more meaningful. Just a note on academic approach. As Josh said, I had founded it in 2001. Been doing this work for more than 25 years now. And really love the opportunity to talk with families and students about the opportunity that test preparation can present to raise scores and skills. And we're really proud to collaborate with the district and be supportive of their programming. And with that, thank you all very much. You're welcome to go to the website, caregivers.com, GPS for more, and I'll take any questions.
We're going right into it. Lots of questions about taking both tests and then deciding which score to send. Is it possible? What do you recommend? Go ahead.
Yeah, you know, and some families will say, okay, or the students will, you know, choose, I'm going to go in and take it officially, and then I'll figure out what to do. I'm a big fan of taking practice tests that are, you know, reliable practice tests that predict ahead of time, because you have only so many Saturdays that you don't want to necessarily have to go into a test center and take an official score, take an official test, when you could learn that through a safe practice test experience. So I do believe in taking both tests, but at the outset as practice tests, and then developing an efficient plan for when I go in to take it officially. I'm going to focus on this test. And of course, as we know, everyone in the district, all juniors, are going to be taking the April ACT anyway with their school. So you're definitely going to have that exposure for sure. But any other opportunities, you might want to inform first some of those choices with some practice tests.
And then, of course, you can submit your best score that way.
Yes, yes. And there's two things to know: score choice, which is that students only have to disclose what they want to disclose. You could take a test multiple times and just choose to send one of them, while effectively suppressing the others because you don't send them, so colleges never know. And there's also something called super scoring, where if you take the test twice and send both scores, they will take your highest scores from one and match it with your highest scores from the other, which is to your advantage to take the test a couple times.
What's your advice about retaking a test?
There's great research to show that if there is preparation between test one and test two, that the majority of students grow. And if you think of it, of course, it's like anything else. You practice. If you're an athlete, if you're a musician, you practice, you go to a recital, you go to a game, you reflect on your performance, you make a few changes, you're better the next time. So it's like any other training process. You get better through repetitions.
Will the new ACT be offered both digitally and on paper?
This is very interesting. I didn't make these decisions. I'm just a messenger. So, but what is happening is the new digital SAT, the new ACT core is going to be administered only digitally in April and June and July. Its first paper and digital occurrence will be in September. So if you wanted to take the new not the classic, which is what the district will be giving in April, but the core, which is the shorter one with the optional science, that's only available digitally in April, June, and July, and then it becomes available in paper and digital as of September. And they have not yet disclosed which test centers will be hosting the digital core ACT in April, June, and July. So we have some, we're looking for that information. But by September, since the classic ACT will be gone and it will all be core, there'll be lots of test centers offering that paper core ACT as of September.
For the class of 26, our juniors, is the April ACT a practice test or the real test? And then you can take it again in the fall, correct?
Yes.
Like.
The April ACT that the district is offering is a real ACT, and it can be used to apply to colleges. So if you take that test and you like your score, that was a test that was given, administered at your school, paid for by the district. It's a wonderful service they offer, and that is a real ACT that can be reported to colleges.
If juniors take the pre-ACT in October and have taken the PSAT as well, is that a good indicator? The earlier PSATs seem to have different scores.
So if you take the PSAT that is administered in the fall is basically the same length and construct as the SAT. So the PSAT is a great predictor of the SAT. As far as pre-ACT, I'm not sure what that's referring to, because there's there is no pre-ACT that's offered. There's a PSAT that is offered to juniors in the district. If you have the PSAT, and the results will come back not long after taking it in this October, and then you took a practice ACT, that would be a great way to make a comparison. But you need a practice ACT from somewhere.
Do you think that digital tests where your right or wrong answers affect whether you receive easier or harder questions going forward unfairly discriminates against students with mild attention issues that are prone to careless mistakes?
That's a great question. So the way the SAT is working right now is it's not adaptive question by question. It's adaptive by stage. So module 1, if you get any of the questions right, enough of the questions from easy, medium, hard throughout that module right, you hit a cutoff that goes up to the harder, or a cutoff that goes down to the lower. So it's not item by item. But what I would say is to the question of students, when we work with a lot of students on 504 plans, IEPs, and with a variety of different attentional issues or learning challenges. Yes, these tests do require tremendous procedural discipline to be careful to avoid careless mistakes, and working on attention, working on academic habits, to annotate, to do step-by-step problem solving to avoid those procedural mistakes is really important work for all students, but certainly those students that need strategies to be able to hone their attention and make sure that their process is really linear and clear and careful. But it's a great teaching opportunity for those students.
Do you know why they made the switch in Illinois to the ACT?
The same reason why they made the switch back in 2016 when SAT won the contract from ACT dollars. They came in and underbid. ACT came in underbid SAT and saved the state a number of millions of dollars, which is very, very helpful, of course, for those trying to be responsible with the budget. I would also say that there are a number of questions maybe about the reporting and the transparency of the digital SAT. The school administrators that we worked with, and as we were working throughout the year last year, trying to make sense of the data, we're not terribly satisfied with all the reporting and detail they received on the SAT. So I do think ACT has a history. It's been in Illinois. It was 2001, 2016, gave a lot of great information back to school administrators and educators. And I think that was another reason, is that they felt comfortable with ACT reporting and information a bit more.
Mm. I think you answered this. Will the new ACT be offered both digitally and on paper?
It will be offered both digitally and on paper, but only in September of 2025. In its April, June, and July administrations, they'll all be digital and only digital and no paper.
I see. Very good. Well, we have an expert here. We have so many people that stuck with us. I'm really so grateful. It's always great to hear you and learn from you, Matt. We appreciate you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And join us next time. Yes, come back when we'll be talking about financial aid. And next week, we'll be talking about some of the challenges our kids face today, next Thursday. So bring a friend next time. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.